The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide plains when Sarah stepped out of her small wooden cabin. The air was cold, carrying the scent of rain and dust. Her hands were rough from work, her face pale from long days under the sun. She was a widow, alone for nearly 2 years now, trying to keep her little farm alive with nothing but faith and determination. Her husband Thomas had died in an accident during a storm. Since then, she had learned to plow, plant, and mend fences by herself. People in town often pitied her, but Sarah had grown used to silence and hardship. She lived for the simple act of surviving one more day. That morning, she went to fetch water from the creek that ran behind her land. The ground was slippery from the night rain, and she moved carefully, holding the old metal bucket tight. But then she stopped. Something was lying in the grass by the creek, something big. She squinted in the dim light and felt her heart quicken. It was a man. She dropped the bucket and ran forward. The man was covered in mud and blood, his hat lying a few feet away. His shirt was torn and there was a dark stain on his shoulder. His face was hidden under his arm. For a moment, Sarah thought he might be dead. Then she heard a faint sound at the weak groan. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. The man's eyes fluttered open, pale blue and clouded with pain. "Water," he muttered. Sarah rushed to fill her bucket and lifted it carefully to his lips. He drank a few sips and coughed, his hand trembling. "Easy," she said softly, steadying him. "You're hurt bad. I was ambushed," he managed to say. "Out on the trail, my horse ran off." Sarah looked around nervously. There were no tracks she could see, but the thought of bandits made her uneasy. Still, she couldn't leave him there. She had seen too much loss already. "You can't stay out here," she said. "I'll help you get to the cabin." It took her almost half an hour to drag the stranger up the hill, stopping every few steps to let him breathe. He was tall and heavy, built like a man used to hard work, and even unconscious, he seemed to carry a weight of pride. When she finally got him onto her porch, she was shaking from exhaustion. She laid him on her husband's old cot and cleaned his wound with what little medicine she had left. When he woke again, the sun was high. He tried to sit up but groaned from the pain. "You should rest," Sarah told him, adjusting the blanket. He blinked at her, confused. "Where am I?" "My farm," she replied. "You're safe here." "My name's Sarah Collins," he gave a weak smile. "Jack Turner," he said. "Guess I owe you my life, ma'am." She nodded slightly, avoiding his gaze. "You owe me nothing. Just heal and move on when you can." Over the next few days, Sarah took care of Jack the best she could. She boiled herbs for his fever, changed his bandages, and kept a fire burning through the night. At first, he barely spoke, but as his strength returned, he began to help where he could. He mended the fence, fixed her leaky roof, and even repaired the old plow that hadn't worked since Thomas died. Sarah found herself watching him sometimes as he worked outside. He moved with quiet strength, his face lined but kind. There was something steady about him, something that reminded her of the life she once had. A man's laughter at the dinner table, the smell of hay and rain, the sound of boots on the porch. She would turn away quickly whenever those thoughts came. Her heart wasn't ready to feel again. Jack noticed her silence, but he never pressed her. One evening, while they sat by the fire, he spoke in a soft tone. "You live here all alone?" "Yes," she said simply. "It's not much, but it's home," he nodded. "Your husband must have been a good man." "Everything here's built solid." Sarah looked down at her hands. He's gone now. Jack didn't say anything after that. He just stared into the fire for a long time, and for some reason, his quiet respect made her chest ache a little. Days turned into weeks. The spring rains came, and the fields began to turn green again. Sarah and Jack worked side by side, planting seeds and clearing the barn. The loneliness that had once filled the house started to fade. There was laughter again, small at first, then stronger. But one morning, Sarah noticed something strange. A rider appeared on the distant road heading toward her land. When he got closer, she could see the man wore a long brown coat and carried a badge on his chest. He was a marshal. He dismounted near the fence, tipping his hat. "Morning, ma'am," he said politely. "I'm looking for a man named Jack Turner." "You seen him?" Sarah froze. Her hands gripped the edge of her apron. "What for?" she asked carefully. The marshal's eyes narrowed. "He's wanted for a robbery out near Clearwater. 2 men dead. We've been tracking him for weeks." Her breath caught. She looked back at the cabin where Jack was working by the stable, unaware. He waved when he saw her, his face open and kind. But now doubt filled her heart. Could it be true? I haven't seen anyone, she said slowly. The marshal studied her for a long moment, then nodded. If you do, let me know. Dangerous man, that one. He climbed back on his horse and rode off down the trail. Sarah stood there long after he was gone, her thoughts tangled. Jack had saved her farm, her hope. But now she wondered if she had saved the wrong man. When she walked back to the cabin, Jack smiled at her, wiping sweat from his brow. Everything all right? He asked. She forced a smile, but inside, her world had begun to shift. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of the marshal's words, of the kindness in Jack's eyes, and of the terrible possibility that everything she thought she knew might soon change forever. Sarah didn't light the lamp that night. She sat near the window, watching the moonlight fall across the empty fields. The wind moved softly through the trees, whispering in a way that made her uneasy. Every sound from outside made her heart jump. Somewhere in the darkness was a man she had trusted, fed, and helped to heal, and now she wasn't sure who he truly was. She looked at the closed door of the spare room where Jack slept. For weeks, she had felt peace for the first time since her husband's death. She had laughed again, worked with someone again, even shared quiet suppers without feeling so alone. But the marshal's words had broken that calm. When dawn came, Sarah still hadn't slept. She made coffee and stepped outside to gather her thoughts. Jack was already awake, feeding the horses. He smiled when he saw her, the same calm, kind smile that had once comforted her. But now it only deepened her confusion. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," she replied. He nodded, studying her face. "Something's bothering you." Sarah hesitated. "Jack," she said slowly, "a marshal came by yesterday. He was looking for you." Jack froze. His hand stopped midway to the feed bucket. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he sighed and set the bucket down. "I figured they'd come sooner or later. So it's true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What he said?" Jack looked down at the ground. "Depends on what he told you." "He said you robbed a place near Clearwater. He said 2 men died." Jack met her eyes. "I didn't kill anyone, Sarah, but I was there. I made some bad choices and I ran when I shouldn't have." Sarah stepped back, shaking her head slightly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was trying to stay alive," he said quietly. "And I didn't want to drag you into it. You saved me when I had nothing. I couldn't bring more trouble to your door." The pain in his voice was real, but Sarah didn't know what to believe. She turned away, her heart torn between fear and pity. "You have to leave," she whispered. "If they find you here, they'll think I helped you." Jack nodded slowly. "I understand." He picked up his hat from the porch rail, brushing off the dust. "Thank you for what you did, Sarah. I won't forget it." She stood there as he saddled one of the horses, her hands gripping the edge of her shawl. Something inside her wanted to call him back, to ask for the truth, but pride held her still. When he rode away, she watched until the figure disappeared over the hill. The days that followed were empty again. The cabin felt colder, the silence heavier. She tried to go about her chores, but everything reminded her of him. The tools he fixed, the laugh that used to echo from the barn, the chair he'd sat in by the fire. She told herself she had done the right thing, but her heart ached with doubt. A week later, another knock came at her door. It was the marshal again, his horse covered in trail dust. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "We found Turner's horse near the ridge. You sure you haven't seen him?" Sarah hesitated. "No, sir," she said softly. The marshal studied her eyes for a moment. "If he comes back, you'd best stay away. Man like him can fool even the kindest heart." He tipped his hat and rode off again. That night, as the sky turned dark and a storm rolled in, Sarah sat by the fire, listening to the rain hit the windows. She felt restless. Every crack of thunder made her flinch. Then faintly over the sound of the storm she heard something, hoofbeats. Her heart leapt. She grabbed a lantern and stepped outside. The wind nearly blew it out, but she shielded the flame with her hand. Through the rain she saw a horse galloping hard toward her house. When it stopped, she saw Jack slide down, drenched and pale. "Jack!" she gasped. "What are you doing here?" He could barely stand. "They found me," he said, breathing hard. "I didn't want to lead them here, but they shot my horse. I had nowhere else to go." Sarah helped him inside. His arm was bleeding again, the bandage torn. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. I know, he said. But I can't keep running forever. I need you to hear the truth. He told her everything. Months before, he had worked for a cattle company that transported money across the territory. Some men he rode with planned to steal it. He tried to stop them, but when the robbery went wrong, 2 men were killed. The others fled, and the blame fell on him. He ran, hoping to clear his name someday, but the law never listens to a drifter's story. I was on my way to turn myself in when they ambushed me, he said quietly. That's when you found me. You saved me before I could even make things right. Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for deceit, but saw only weariness and pain. Why tell me now? She asked. Because I can't leave this world with someone thinking I'm a murderer, he said softly. I needed you to know the truth. Before she could answer, lightning flashed outside, followed by a shout. Jack Turner, come out now. The marshal's voice cut through the storm. Jack's face went pale. They must have tracked me here, he said. Sarah ran to the window. Several riders were outside, their lanterns glowing in the rain. The marshal sat tall in his saddle, his hand near his holster. If you're in there, come out peaceful. Sarah turned back to Jack. You can't go out there, she said. They'll shoot first, he shook his head. If I run again, they'll never believe me. I have to face it. She stepped in front of him. Then I'm going with you. He looked at her surprised. Why? Because I know what it's like to lose everything and still try to do what's right, she said. If you're telling the truth, I'll stand by it. They stepped out together into the rain. The marshal raised his gun. Back away, ma'am, he shouted. Sarah lifted her lantern high. This man saved my life and I saved his. You'll listen to what he has to say before you call him a killer. The marshal hesitated. The sight of the small widow standing firm beside the wanted man was enough to make the riders pause. After a tense moment, he lowered his gun slightly. Then he better start talking, he said. Hours passed before the storm ended. By morning, the marshal's men had checked the evidence Jack spoke of. The stolen money buried near the river, the names of the real thieves. Everything matched. When they rode away, the marshal stopped beside Sarah. Seems you were right, ma'am. He's a free man now. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching as the riders disappeared into the horizon. Jack stood beside her, exhausted but alive. You could have let them take me, he said quietly. Why didn't you? She smiled faintly. Because you didn't run from the truth. A guilty man would have. He looked at her for a long moment, rain still dripping from his hat. I don't know what comes next, he said. Then stay until you figure it out, she replied softly. Days later, as sunlight returned to the plains, Sarah found herself laughing again. The world hadn't given her much kindness, but somehow, fate had brought her someone who understood loss, pain, and starting over. Jack helped rebuild the barn roof that spring, his laughter echoing across the field. For the first time in years, the old cabin didn't feel like a lonely place. Sarah had saved a stranger's life. But in the end, that stranger had saved hers too in ways words could never explain.